Oh, great.
Don't have to worry about being live though. So how's Canada?
It's Canada.
Is it cold? Is it? You're not cold now.
It's no, it's not. It's not. It's not freezing or anything yet. I guess we're still got rain and whatever. No snow in the mountains yet either. So we're yeah, yeah. I guess it's still summer here. So although winter comes a little earlier here than most places. So
Oh, does it?
yeah, I guess summer will be over at the end of August probably. So we'll might as well enjoy what we have and do our best. So
So what kind of temperature do you have right now?
oh, I don't know, probably 10 or 15 degrees Celsius.
Oh, you can't convert that to Fahrenheit, can you?
No, I don't have any conversion table here at the
Okay.
moment. So
So would that be cold enough to be out or warm enough to be outside in a t-shirt?
you would freeze. Well, not freeze, but you would get cold. Yeah.
So
So
it's more like sweatshirt weather or light coat.
sweatshirt, I guess. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Unless you're hiking up a mountain or something, then it could be t-shirt weather. Although we used to play hacky sack in minus 30 Celsius too, so I mean that was really cold. But when you're sweating outside, I guess it doesn't really matter.
Minus 30 Celsius.
Yeah, I guess that would be. I guess it converges at minus 35 Fahrenheit and Celsius, so or
Wow.
40. Anyway,
Wow.
yeah.
You know, not to drastically change the subject or anything, but
Please do.
I don't know if you've seen this movie yet. You remember the controversial photograph with Ascot and Nira
Mm-hmm.
that turned out to be two of the Dean Martin girls?
Yes.
And one of the Dean Martin girls, I forget her name. If I thought about it a while, I'd remember it.
Michelle de la Fave.
Yes, that's her.
Yeah.
Guess
Yeah.
who just visited Billy and Hinterschmidt Rudy?
Yeah, I saw that.
Did you
That's
see the
actually.
movie?
I watched it. Yeah, it was really interesting.
It was interesting, and one of the things I liked about it was Billy seemed kind of vibrant and younger.
Mm-hmm.
Like he used to, when he was speaking in English, it was more like back in his Randy Winters days, which is I just like him that way. I don't know. That's when he
Yeah.
really,
Yeah. Well, he is pleasant to talk to. I don't know. I think it's just like anybody else. If you're open and have good conversation, you can have good conversation.
but he didn't speak to you in English though.
A little bit. He would have to revert to English when I couldn't understand something. Somebody else would have to translate sometimes for me too, or. But I would try and do as much German as I could. So. Yeah.
But they spoke to her and her friend in English.
Mm-hmm.
I hadn't heard Billy do an English interview in so long. It was really kind of nice
Yeah. Yeah.
for us wimpy English speaking people.
I would love to be able to read all this stuff in German like really well. That would be great one day. That's kind of my big goal. So.
Well, you know, I would like to order this book, Love Letter 27.
Oh.
Probably, do you know that book?
No, I don't.
Well, I'm not so sure that this one is particular. This particular one is actually public. This may be something. Well, maybe you know this there because you're kind of a. I forget all the different degrees of membership. What level of membership do you have?
I'm just a basic passing member.
A
Nothing
passive
fancy.
member. Well, some members have access to certain material and certain spiritual teachings, and this particular one is called Love Letter 27, and it's the most profound information on the creation, particularly related to love, that I've ever heard
Hmm.
him write, and it's just phenomenal stuff. So
Mm.
I might not be able to get this now that I'm thinking of it, but they have another book called The Law of Love, which I assume might be close.
Yes. I don't know if they're going to be Is that the one talking about relationships and things, or is that
I don't know. To tell you the
okay?
truth, I
Yeah,
really don't know. It
because there's
may.
different kinds of love, right? So I mean, there's relationship love and so on.
Well,
And there's an interesting book about that, and I kind of flipped through a little bit of it. It's actually a pretty tiny book, and yeah, it got me thinking about a few things.
now
And but
let
yeah,
let let me throw something at you here, because when I'm talking about love, I'm not talking about people love. Okay,
yeah, I
I'm,
hear you.
I'm the least interested in that of any person that you might ever come across. Uh, but this is something different. Let me read this to you.
Go
And I
for it.
think I've experienced this before, but I didn't know what it was. The person must only be willing to see and recognize this love, and he will begin to feel it. If he opens to the love of creation and he allows it to flow into himself, he becomes filled with respectful gratitude and great joy. Each smallest plant, each ever so tiny animal was created in love by creation, each creation existing according to the same law of love. All life is in absolute perfection, that which it should be through the love of creation, and except for humans, every life form lives exactly by creation's plan. Only humans have turned away from love and must now learn again what true love is. The infinite love of creation connects all life, because in all life this love lies hidden. And it just goes on and on and on like this. So this to me is, and I even skip my favorite parts, but
Oh,
it's one of the most awesome, and I quote this all the time on the radio show. This particular thing, but yeah, I love this, man. It's just awesome.
I'll have to read it. It sounds wonderful.
You have to look
I'm
it up. It's translated by is her name Robin?
oh, Robin Folly.
I think so. She's from Australia, is she, or is she from Canada?
No, Australia. Yeah.
Australia, yeah. Very, very good.
Okay. Oh,
I'm,
right
I'm
on.
not so sure this is, I don't think this is completely open to the public. I think she's has only been partially allowed to be translated.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Now
Well,
I'm thinking.
it's a worthwhile subject. I every time I try and I was just thinking today, it would be so fantastic is just to go out and walk in nature a little bit, just so I can reconnect with that exactly what you're describing there. Man, I just so missing that lately. I'm so caught up in all these situations with these people, and they're all nuts, and I'm just trying to make sense of anything. And just getting further and further away from that, and it's just yeah, it's time to reconnect.
Well, I now that I'm going through the Might of Thoughts for the sixth time, because I'm a remedial learner, I guess I have to
Well,
read
I
his
guess
books six. I'll probably have to read this 10 times. But there's one section here. It's between pages 200 and 230, where he talks more about what neutral positive thinking is. And I took notes, and they're all over my website. I'm also scribbles around the house here. And I hit like 7 major points. And it relates to what you were saying about craziness and crazy people, because when things get really rough, I remember these 7 things because they come from the book. And it says, I tell myself, I'm optimistic, I'm confident, I'm relaxed, I'm cheerful, I'm thankful, and I'm enthusiastic. And
hmm
that takes away the garbage. That puts starts me back on neutral positive thinking. And then I just added one more. I am in harmony is
hmm
my 7th concept. So, but yeah, just little things like this in this book are so helpful.
Yeah. Well, it's funny that you mentioned yeah, because I was just reading about neutral positivity before you called. So
Is that right?
in in the psyche, yeah. So on pages, I guess 160, 162 or whatever in the English version, anyway.
Why
So.
don't you read a little bit?
Oh, well, it was just kind of talking about, how nature. Well, actually, you know what? One thing I was kind of exploring, I guess, again, as you're saying, you're kind of a remedial learner. I am too. So,
I have
because
to
I've.
go over it 6 times. I'll probably have to go over it 10 times. This whole,
Oh, geez.
there's
Yeah,
so much in there.
it's ridiculous. Yeah, I forget things because I get caught up in situations. But that's a way to gain contrast. Because that's how you learn is through experiences, and then you think about them. So these books kind of provide a way to explore those experiences, and but I was, kind of getting caught up in a lot of negativity lately and so forth, and it was kind of getting worse and worse, and I was thinking to myself, hey, you know what? I remember reading in the psyche. Well, that's pretty much what the whole book is about, because your psyche is basically everything. I mean, it's not everything, but I mean, it's really in terms of your conscious health. If you don't have a healthy psyche, you've really got nothing. So
Hmm.
it's the psyche is just amazing, and so I've been kind of rehashing, I guess, for myself in reviewing what is neutral positive thinking and how to, because a lot, what the main source of the problem for me lately has been people who are only positive, who they completely ignore any negatives whatsoever, and the negatives are there anyways. They build up and they build up and they build up, and then these people, after a while, will have to be forced to admit, and they always are, again and again over the years, forced to admit that, oh yeah, all this positive blah 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 stuff that I was talking about before is a bunch of nonsense. Well, yeah, it's because they weren't being neutral positive. They were just being. It's like a positive degeneration, or I
Hmm.
guess they call it a positive Aushaltung. Um,
Ausartung, yeah.
yeah, and so, but it also works with the negative. If you're too negative, um, in a degenerative form, then it degenerates into a negative situation as well. So I find this, in the contacts, is for me probably the thing I think about the most in terms of the spirit teaching.
Hmm.
I think it's probably the most important thing that, I just, the whole point that, there's this whole positive thinking movement and so on and so forth. And basically what they're trying to do is ignore the negative, ignore the negative, ignore the negative. And it doesn't
Yes.
work. Of course it doesn't
Yes.
work.
Yes.
So it's like saying 2 + 2 = 3. Well, yeah, you can keep reaffirming yourself that, but if you come down to economics or whatever, trying to make a cake, with a recipe or all this kind of stuff, you have to go back to no 2 + 2 = 4, and that's the end of it. There's no discussion there. I mean, but I just you see that with religious people, they're trying to assert something that isn't true, and it's a positive degeneration. So it's not a natural forming neutral ground anymore, and so that's why it collapses. It's just like trying to build a building on a weak foundation. Of course, it's going to collapse. So it's yeah.
Boy, it speaking of religion, it does sound like in many ways it's on the verge of collapse.
I sure hope so. After these last few weeks, I've been thinking about that more and more and more, and I've thought about it lots before, but
So
man, like,
are you
oh,
having like family issues with religion?
oh, huge. Like, it's just, I don't talk about religion. I don't even talk to them anymore about anything. Like, it's just watching their behavior and being at the receiving end of it. And I'm just sitting there and having to take it. And I'm just, eventually I just blow up. I'm like, okay, I can't take this anymore. Like, this is just driving me nuts. And so it's over the top, and I just see these situations because these people have grown up a lot more into the religion than I ever was, and they still adhere to it, and they're still into it, and I see, certain people are saying they're not religious, but they act completely religious. Like they don't check first before they assert something. They don't. see if something is true before they really go for it and act as if it's true, all this kind of stuff. And it's just ongoing. It's just these behaviors that are just so ingrained in them, and it's just oh man, you can't live with that because they don't care, they don't listen, they're not interested at all, in what's real. They're just interested in what makes them feel good, and that's it. So a lot of the times it comes down to them saving face, which Billy wrote a great article about that, and I'm so glad I read that years ago. And saving face is just such a waste of time. And so that's kind of another positive degeneration in many instances. It's trying to reassert too much of a positive image of yourself, and it's not, if it's not real, then it collapses. So
I guess I've told you about my little visitors from the I forget which church it was, the Jehovah Witnesses. Daniel, I mean, I had a great time with them. They came back, and they were going to come back a third time. They called me to come back the third time, and I just never got back to them.
Yeah.
But I don't know what it was. It was just, I like to talk about the Bible, but I talk about it now more from the Meier perspective. Mm-hmm. And I find the best thing to do is to ask them simple questions.
Yeah, yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like, remember when Cain killed Abel? And then Cain takes a wife in the land of Nod? Where did his wife come from? Because according to the Bible, or most people's interpretation, and literally what it says, there was only Adam, Eve, and their two sons, Cain and Abel. Where did the land of Nod come from? And then if you read a little bit farther, he was building a city. It says literally that Cain was building a city. And my questions are, who was the city for? And how did he even know what a city was?
Right.
Yeah. I mean, there's no. So I asked them the same kind of questions. I go, I remember reading this when I was 13 years old, and I had these questions, and I have not gotten a good answer. And I'm a whole lot older than 13.
Yeah.
So I said, here you have a story that's accepted throughout the world, and it has a hole in it big enough to drive a semi-truck through. Mm-hmm, exactly. I mean, it's just little. And then my next thing I always like to go to is Numbers 31:7, where Moses commands the army of Israel to wipe out the Midianites. So they kill all the soldiers. Mm-hmm. And then they come back, and Moses is enraged because they didn't kill the women and the children. Isn't that nice? I mean, that's really okay. I mean, normal civilized people would, read this and go, whoa.
Yeah.
So
exactly.
And then Moses goes on, well, so go back and kill the women and the children, but, and this is where it gets really interesting, keep the virgins for yourself. Oh, wait a minute. So these Midianites were so bad, you had to kill them all but the virgins.
Right.
Why do you get to keep the virgins? And then they even wrote down how many they kept.
Right.
In this chapter, they kept 32,000 virgins.
Oh, geez, eh?
I mean,
what did they do with them after? Right?
Wow. They didn't tell us that part of the story.
Right.
But there is a Italian guy who is a Hebrew expert. I mean, what he did, he worked for like 20 years or 15 years for the Vatican, translating Hebrew texts. So he He was so good at it, he was recognized as one of the best in the world. They said, "Would you translate the Old Testament for us?" And he translated it literally with no religious overtone whatsoever. And
Awesome.
instead of Lord and Adonai and in terms like that, he went back to the original, and where the word Elohim appears, instead of calling that God or whatever term they would insert, he would interpret it very literally, like those guys over there, those people over there, or whatnot. But you have to listen to this guy
Hmm.
because I mean, you've heard the Giza intelligence story, I know,
Mm-hmm.
and that's what he basically says of the Old Testament. It goes perfectly hand in hand with
Wow.
the whole Giza intelligence story. But anyway, yeah, I like to
Yeah.
talk to those kind of people because I've got the questions.
Yeah.
I've got all the.
Well, I had it all depends, and I was kind of thinking about that today, and the whole situation here and so on, and I was thinking to myself that there's people that have good ideas and people that have bad ideas, but you know what? It's not those two that I'm concerned about. It's the people that don't care about their ideas at all, because those are the ones that don't correct anything ever. And that's the problem for me. So whether somebody is right or wrong, I could care less. What I really care about is whether somebody is really interested in actually learning, to figure what those things are. And so for me, it's the kinds of people that don't care what their ideas are, what their thoughts are, what their education is, what reality is, that concern me. And so, like you, I've had conversations with other Christians who are open to, certain questions and things like that, and I think that's wonderful. And it's the people, however, who really don't question anything and who really, you know, just they don't show any motive whatsoever to learn or to think or to discern, uh, you know, fiction from truth. Those are the ones that concern me. Those are the ones that are really, psychopathic, I would say,
What you say
because
is very profound. It really, really is.
yeah. I thought about it today. I was writing and I was looking at that and I thought, yeah, it has nothing to do with right or wrong answers. It's just, do you have the interest to learn? That's everything there. If you don't have that, you've got nothing.
Well, are you dealing with people that are kind of lost in the religious fog, so to speak?
I think they're just so far beyond that I think they just suppressing things in their minds and their consciousness, I should say, and it's just such a huge suppression that I don't know what it is exactly. I've been trying to make sense of it my whole life, actually. And it's really interesting, and that to me it really it rings more to the sense of sort of pathological behavior, and that's to me more what it looks like than anything else. And having read, certain things about psychopathic tendencies and so forth that are, really no remorse for anything and not acknowledging, not listening to anything that anyone says, and not caring, and really having no interest whatsoever in truth and learning and admitting one's mistakes or anything like that, like being completely so far beyond that there's just really no hope of even having a discussion. Like they'll say one thing 1 second and then a minute, like not even 5 seconds later, they'll say that they never said that before, and that's just really insane, really insane. So I think the only thing a person can do in that situation is to create distance. and
Yeah.
because there's really nothing else that nothing else that can be done. They're not open to reason. They're not open to anything.
Well,
And
I'm a strange bird. You probably know that very well. People who listen to the show know that very well. But
we're all strange.
but like I like a lot of times to watch the documentaries on some of the televangelists. Like, have you ever heard like of the guy Benny Hinn?
No, I don't think so.
Oh man, I'll have to send you some links. He heals people, right?
Okay.
With the power of God, of course.
All right.
And he travels all over the world, and he makes now. He gets 100 million a year from his listeners. Now, how much of that is put back in his ministry? Probably a lot of it, because now he has Lear jets and things like that. He has to shoot around the world with. And then he has one of his sessions where the people come up on stage and he quote unquote heals them. And some of them may actually get better by the power of their own thoughts.
Yeah. Yeah.
You-
But that has nothing to do with him.
no, not really. Not really. So it's very. Have you heard of another one from Texas? His name is Kenneth Copeland. Have you heard of him?
Yeah, that rings a bell.
He's been in trouble with the government a couple times.
Okay.
He has 2 Lear jets. He has. I know it's absurd, isn't it? It's absurd.
Jeez.
$40 million a piece. They are the top of the line Lear jets. I mean, you can't get any better. He's got 2 of them.
Jeez.
And he has this giant mansion in Texas. I mean, it just, it's so huge. You can't even. And he built a runway for his Lear jets.
Oh, I thought you were going to say he was one of those cargo cults. No, I'm just kidding.
No. But he's got all kinds of planes. But
Wow.
he's another one that I don't think he heals people, though.
No.
Another one is Joel Osteen.
Okay.
Who he makes about 100 million a year too. But I don't think he heals people. Maybe he does. I don't know. But
Right.
now think about. I mean, it's really huge. This is very, very popular, and these people have gigantic followings, and that's how much in need people are to
Do you
get
know that? Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
to get a hold of real information. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Do you know that? Do you know this actually relates to a documentary I did see one time with Darren Brown, and this guy is like a magician, and what he did basically was he actually trained somebody to like become a spiritual healer, so to speak, and to go around and do the circuit kind of thing, and people were falling for it. In the United States, I guess it had to be like in Texas or whatever it was. I think it was in Dallas that they did like a big, event or whatever, and they pretended that this guy was a spiritual healer, and then he basically explained at the end of the thing that no, it's all bullshit. So
Did he really?
yeah. So, but they were totally into it. They were falling for it, and they, some of them were like, oh yeah, this is really working and all this kind of stuff, and. But that's what the Meier material goes into, is that it's your own consciousness that's doing that. It's not them. It's not it's not the other person that's doing it to you. It's yourself doing it to yourself. And there is a legitimate thing there, and we all know about the placebo effect, for example. It works. And there's also the nocebo effect, which is like the negative version where you get sick based on,
Your thoughts.
Your thoughts. Yeah, exactly. And so it works. It does work. And even doctors and so on will say that, yes, the placebo effect is real. I mean, everyone can agree on that. And so, and it's more, there's more to it, of course, than just the placebo too. But your thoughts are very powerful. And that's, I think, the one thing that the contacts are trying to teach us. And, that Billy and his friends and whatever who he's worked with his whole life are really trying to teach us that you don't have to pay these guys hundreds of millions of dollars to
You know,
to do
though,
this stuff.
Daniel, they can pay me a few million. I'm not going to complain. That's terrible. I shouldn't say that.
Jeez.
Next thing I'll do is be a televangelist.
Yeah,
Okay.
there you
Anyway,
go. Woo.
let me read this.
Don't
Uh,
forget your friends.
right, exactly.
Of course, you won't have any by then, but yeah.
I know. Right? Okay. Okay, here, this is interesting. With problems, difficulties, and errors, one must always search for a creative and constructive solution, which is also progressive and therefore positive. Thinking in a neutral positive equalized form also means always being objective, realistic, enthusiastic, hopeful, and optimistic. You know, and one of the things I'm getting this time through the book is that neutral positive is a little more positive than I realized.
Hmm.
You know, optimistic, enthusiastic, hopeful.
Right.
That's pretty positive in some ways. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But
Well, I have some examples here of what different kinds of thinking, negative thinking and positive thinking and so forth here on this page. Actually, I might as well just read them. So, for example, of a negative thinking, I am ill, I am in pain, and the reaction of your subconscious would be, I am ill and I'm in pain. So, and another one would be, it's a little bit more indirect. So it's like attempted healing of the psyche. It's called negative opposite thinking. So in this case, they're saying every day I feel better and better, etc., which equals in your subconscious mind because your subconscious only interprets things, in the now. It doesn't discern now from later or anything like that. It just what it's saying with every day I feel better and better is I am ill and I am in pain,
wow,
because better and better it means, well, better than what? So you're still thinking about the negative in that sense. So whereas for an example here of a healing psyche or an absolute neutral thinking or positive thinking or a wishful dream, it would be like the rose is wonderfully beautiful or how marvelously warm the sun is, and the reaction of the subconscious mind is the rose is wonderfully beautiful and how marvelously warm the sun is. So I don't know if there's any on the next page, but no,
what
I don't see
page?
any.
Well, now we may have different versions of the psyche, but what page are you on?
I'm on 162 here,
I,
so
I I've noticed this before. Once in a while, I'll have a different. No, here it is. I got the same version.
okay, yeah,
Yeah, I
yeah.
am.
So
Every day
right,
I feel better and better. Reaction of the subconscious. I am in ill. I am in pain. Oh, that's horrible.
yeah.
The,
So right above that, there's the paragraph. It says that real positive thinking means absolute neutral positive thinking. Thus, not contrarily speaking against a matter. Absolute neutral positive thinking for the psyche also further means that a really completely neutral topic must be used for the thinking, something that in no wise stands in any relation to the negative, terrible thing. So then
that's
you have the
great.
examples.
That's really good.
Yeah,
That's quite
yeah,
helpful.
it is. Just the page before it, they were kind of going into, how nature deals with, a negative and so forth, and in a neutral sense. So, or an over positive or over negative degeneration or imbalance, I should say. And so, which turns into a degeneration in the end. So I just think it's a fascinating few pages, and I've been kind of going over this the last few days, and it's really actually starting to help me to regain my own like I can breathe, and I'm here. I'm actually
Okay. So here's the thing. Boy, I need to go back over this big time. So what happens, I guess, is the terrible things go into the subconscious,
hmm
and then the subconscious tries to push these terrible things back into the conscious mind.
hmm
Ah,
exactly. So um, yeah, and so I'm still trying to work it all out, and I think it's just fascinating because one of my favorite books before I got into the Meier material was the book by Jim Collins, and it's called Get Good to Great. Why some companies make the leap and others don't, and it can be applied to nonprofit organizations and so on and so forth too. But one of the themes all the way throughout the book, and it was like a research thing done at Stanford, and it had like a bunch of his best students from over the years that did this research. And one of the main things throughout the whole book was this neutrality and the importance of neutrality and neutral thinking and not letting the negative get out of hand. And it's just like a garden. And they didn't use this analogy, but I like to use this analogy of a garden because if you're trying to make something beautiful grow or something nutritious grow, you have to pull the weeds.
Oh, sure. Yeah, definitely.
So, and
Good
people,
point.
people, their version of positive thinking is, well, just leave the weeds, just let them grow, just ignore them. Yeah, sure, that's going to help.
Mm.
You're going to end up with a garden full of weeds and no food, and you'll starve. So, it's an example, and it's a symbolic example that it's very real. It's very real. And so you have to do this with music if you want to do well in music. You have to really practice scales. You have to do it with a metronome. 1, 2, 3, 4. And you can't stray from that. And if you really want to learn it, so
Well, one of the things that struck me when you were talking earlier is the verb tense, that it has to be like is for it to be neutral positive, right?
yeah, yeah.
I can't if it goes out of that is, you're saying the subconscious drops the ball and says, "Oh no."
Yeah, if you're saying, yeah, for example, I would like, or,
Mm.
this would be nice, that's a negative.
It's actually negative to your subconscious.
Yeah, it's telling it that, well, it's not there, so, well, okay, so you're in a bad situation. Here.
So, does that infer that the subconscious kind of draws its own conclusion?
Well, it just thinks in the present. It doesn't discern, like, for example, from a dream from reality. Like if you're there thinking about a lemon and how it tastes and all this kind of stuff, then your mouth starts watering. Well, that's your subconscious mind. It doesn't mean there's a real lemon there and you're physically reacting to it. It's just even the thought of a lemon. So if you're dreaming like a wishful dream, for example, or a negative dream or whatever it might be, your subconscious is always reacting to that in the present, and it's always in the present. There's no future or past in the subconscious um, mind or thinking. I guess I don't know if you want to say thinking, but it's it's recording. It's sort of a mirror of you, and the point of the conscious mind, I guess, is to sort of to be the driver. You know,
So, the subconscious, it then must have information that maybe the conscious mind does not have.
yeah. Well, I mean, it's like a big recording device, basically. So,
No
you know,
kidding.
it all the stuff about our previous lifetimes, it's attached to our spirit form and so on and so forth, which has information about many many things and that our conscious mind isn't aware of. And
Oh,
later on we'll be able to use that, but right now we can't. So
this is
it's
very interesting because I think I may have. I'm forgetting where I read this. Probably on the Billy Meier wiki somewhere, and then I took it and put it in my notes. Um, that the subconscious. Now, correct me if you have information that contradicts this, but what I was reading was that like the unconscious, let's say the unconscious, like if you touch a hot stove, pull your hand back, it happens instantly.
hmm
So the unconscious is like the gatekeeper. It's the first thing that engages reality, and that's why we can pull our hand back and not get burned, because if we had to make that decision, we had to think about it. It would take a second or two, and we'd be fried.
yeah.
So the unconscious observes reality or engages with reality, and then what my understanding is, it decides at that point whether to immediately take action, in the case of you put your hand on a hot stove, or it says, oh, this is something profound. And if it's profound, it will dump the information off to the subconscious. And then the subconscious then is going to mull it over, and eventually try to contact the conscious, I guess. Isn't it bizarre how all this is going on? I'll tell you what, I know this. I have some things in my subconscious that must be really wanting to come out. Like I had this weird dream, maybe it was yesterday, and I don't dream very often, or I don't recall them. I think I push them back into my subconscious, what I do. Right. But there was some kind of dream that I had where I had to roll out of the way of something. And I rolled right off the bed, boom, hit the hardwood floor. It's hilarious. I'm so tired, though. I thought I told my wife, I said, I fell off the bed. She goes, yeah, you fell off the bed. And I'm like, I'm really tired. I'm going back to sleep for a while. I went right back to sleep for like 15 minutes, and then I got up. I mean, who does stuff like that? You know, that's so crazy. So there's some kind of issue, right?
Right.
In my subconscious. Don't know what it is. Still don't know what it is.
Well, it's just sorting things out. It's always kind of working things out, and I don't know if it's working things out. I guess it's main. See, that's where I'm kind of. I need to learn a little bit more about this, you know, because I know the conscious mind definitely is there to work things out, and so the subconscious is sort of just a mirror, and I think it's more just sort of a present sort of snapshot, maybe of where you are, and the point of the conscious mind is to use that and to try and make sense of things. So
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's how you said a mouthful there. Trying to make sense of things.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you know, you got the whole Titanic, you know, it's floating on the water, and then you got this huge ship. Well, what controls it is one little guy in the top of the ship. Well, that's the conscious mind versus the subconscious. I mean, the subconscious mind is huge, and it's got all you know, all the information that, you know, but it's being able to use that and steer it and maneuver it and use it, you know, and try to make sense of things. So yeah, dreams are a huge part of that. And I dream a lot. I don't always know what I'm dreaming, but sometimes I do. And I know my wife had a dream, and that she had gotten pregnant, and I thought, oh no, because she doesn't usually dream. She doesn't usually remember her dreams, and I was like, oh no, really?
But it turned out to be true, right?
It turned out to be true, yeah. So
my goodness,
yeah.
Oh boy,
yeah.
The subconscious is wild.
It is wild, and I have been trying to make sense of it for a long, long time, and
Is music, is it really freeing something in the subconscious or in the unconscious mind? Sometimes I'm thinking that it does.
Yeah, absolutely. There's, you know, like if you improvise, for example, in music, you know, if you're well trained and so on, you know, ideas come out that you never practiced. They're
there, though.
They're there and very clear, like very distinct, and you can, you know, the ideas come out and it's wonderful, and it's like, ooh, okay.
I wish I would have recorded that, right?
Yeah, right.
So your conscious mind can learn it.
Yeah, exactly. So I like to practice, you know, and record while I practice, just to go over ideas and to learn things and so on too. It's wonderful. So yeah. No, I definitely, I think the most subconscious sort of work I've ever done has been done with music. And because, you know, tapping into personalities of other musicians to sort of capture an idea or capture a feeling or something.
Do you remember a singer, Gordon Lightfoot?
Yeah.
Do you remember when he did the wreck of the Edmund Fitzgerald?
I've heard that, actually. I heard that.
You've got to hear it again. Yeah. You've got to listen to the words and that whole music.
He's good. I actually really like some of his music. Is really beautiful. Yeah.
I created a Pandora radio station that plays just the people I like,
Oh,
or
cool.
it's a lot of people, a lot of different
Yeah.
musicians, but the wreck of the Edmund Fitzgerald is the one of the most beautiful and haunting things
Huh.
that you ever come across. You know what the song's about, right?
I guess, well, the Edmund Fitzgerald was a big boat that sank, I guess, in
Yeah,
Canada,
yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah. I think it was in Lake Superior.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, Gigantic. I think it was carrying ore or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
if you'll listen to the music is so beautiful and the singing is so beautiful. But if you listen to the words
Mm.
and
Mm-hmm.
the way these sailors are dealing with the fact that they're all about to die
Mm.
is
Mm-hmm.
so profound. If you think of the subconscious and the unconscious
Mm.
and minds and all that, and this song
Mm.
is phenomenal in that way. It's kind of a negative topic, but I just find it tremendously beautiful. There are
I,
also go ahead. I mean,
I don't think it's negative at all. I think if you're examining, death, I think it's a very, very positive effect in the end because you really appreciate life a lot more and you're able to use it a lot more.
well, there's one line where the cook says he comes up on deck and says, "Boys, I'm sorry, it's too rough to feed you," and he comes up at like noon or something like that, and and then he comes up and it's getting close to the evening. I forget what time it was. And the cook comes up and he says, "Boys, there's water coming in. It's been good to know you." I'm just like, oh my, isn't that the way life is?
Yeah,
So casual. Oh, by the way,
yeah,
we're all
right.
gonna die.
Yeah, well, what else are you gonna do, right?
Right, exactly. It's just so casual. By the way, oh
Yeah,
my goodness, what?
yeah, yeah. Oh, in that situation, I don't see that there's much to do except just have, take it lightly and enjoy it or whatever.
Well, there I'm I focus more on music, which is instrumental, but there are some really good singers and artists that
Hmm.
do write interesting music.
Yeah.
And the words I think are very interesting. One of them, of course, you've heard John Denver, right?
Hmm.
Remember what is it? Annie's song.
Uh,
You fill up my senses like night in a forest, like the mountains in springtime, like a walk in the rain, just like a storm in the desert,
hmm.
like a sleeping blue ocean.
Well,
You fill up my senses, come fill me again. Just beautiful stuff.
yeah, yeah. And
And
it's all written in the present.
I never thought about that.
I have to think about that sometimes when I'm writing lyrics. It's like it doesn't sound as good when it's written, in the past tense or in the future tense. It sounds great when it's in the present tense, and it's way more empowering.
I think the record of Edmund Fitzgerald might be all in the present tense too.
I would imagine so. Yeah.
That is interesting. So that must be a mechanism that pulls you in,
Yeah. Yeah, I think so.
and it must pull the whole mind in, right? Like you were saying before.
Yeah, because you get immersed in the story. Then you're not looking at the story anymore from an outside point of view. You're the one talking then to yourself in a sense through the lyrics. So it's when it's written in the present tense like that, then yeah, you get way more empowering story than you do if it's in any other tense.
Hmm.
So that's what made those super positive, whatever, let's make the world great songs, all that kind of stuff, really cheesy, I find, because they were very rarely in the present tense. It's like, oh, one day the world will be this and all this kind of stuff and blah, blah, blah. Well, it's hard to relate to that.
It is hard to relate to that,
So, yeah, and
but
that's why.
I think the world could be. I think the world could be so fantastic that we couldn't even imagine it if we were all, though, studying the spiritual teachings and applying them.
Well, here's an interesting thought. The world is fantastic because we have the option to make that.
There you go. Is current tense, right?
Yeah, exactly. Well, we have the option to make that. The heaven and hell that we make for ourselves is of our making. So yeah, it's the option that we have. So it's only a really cool world that would allow that. So, and I think it's great too to see that nobody is immune from falling asleep at the wheel. Um, anyone who dares to try it will, you know, reap the consequences of laws of cause and effect. That everybody is, part of that. So I think that's a good thing. And the negatives that result from falling asleep at the wheel, for example, are essential to our learning. So
The negatives of falling asleep at the wheel. Now that was profound, man. That was very profound. Can you bear with me a little bit? Let me read a few of these lyrics to you
yeah, please.
from the wreck of the Edmund Fitzgerald. The legend lives on from the Chippewa on down of the big lake they call Gitche Gumee. The lake, it is said, never gives up her dead when the skies of November turn gloomy. With a load of iron ore 26,000 tons more than the Edmund Fitzgerald weighed empty. The good ship and crew was a bone to be chewed when the gales of November came early. The ship was the pride of the American side, coming back from some mill in Wisconsin. As the big freighters go, it was bigger than most, with a crew and good captain, well seasoned, concluding some terms with a couple of steel firms when they left fully loaded from Cleveland. And later that night, when the ship's bell rang, it could be the north wind they'd been feeling. The wind in the wires made a tattletale sound, and a wave broke over the railing, and every man knew, as the captain did too, 'twas the witch of November come stealin'. The dawn came late, and the breakfast had to wait, when the gales of November came slashin'. When afternoon came, it was freezing rain in the face of a hurricane west wind. When summertime came, the old crook came on deck sayin', "Fellows, it's too rough to feed ya." Oh, when supper time came, I'm sorry. When supper time came, the old crook came on deck saying, "Fellows, it's too rough to feed ya." And at 7 p.m., a main hatchway caved in, and he said, "Fellows, it's been good to know ya." The captain wired in he had water coming in the good ship, and the crew was in peril. And later that night, when his lights went out of sight, came the wreck of the Edmund Fitzgerald. Now listen to this, and think of this in terms of the creation, as opposed to the religious term of God. And the way Gordon sings this is so beautiful. He says, "Does anyone know where the love of God goes when the waves turn the minutes to hours? The searches all say they'd have made Whitefish Bay if they'd put 15 more miles behind her. They might have split up, or they might have capsized. They may have broke deep and took water. And all that remains is the faces and names of the wives and the sons and the daughters." Now, if that is not the perfect image of creation, neutral, even though it radiates love, all these men died because of the waves and the wind. And because they, like you said, they kind of fell asleep at the wheel, right? In some sense. Anyway, it goes, "Lake Huron rolls, Superior sings in the rooms of her ice-water mansion. Old Michigan steams like a young man's dreams. The islands and bays are for sportsmen. And further below, Lake Ontario takes in what Lake Erie can send her. And the iron boats go, as all the mariners know, with the gales of November remembered. In a musty old hall in Detroit they prayed, in the Maritime Sailors' Cathedral, The church bell chimed till it rang 29 times for each man on the Edmund Fitzgerald. The legend lives on from the Chippewa on down of the big lake they call Gitchigumi. Superior, they said, never gives up her dead when the gales of November come early. Now, is that not an amazing piece of music? My
Yeah,
goodness, that is so profound.
that's poetry.
Beautiful.
Yeah, I mean, you don't hear too many artists like that these days.
You sure don't.
I love that.
Was it
I
in
could
the
listen to that.
70s and 80s? It was in the 70s and 80s. I don't know what happened. That was such a good, important time.
Oh, huge. Yeah. Yeah. I think a lot of people were born on purpose or whatever around the music industry, or it's just somehow it just amalgamated in that time. It's just such a great time
What
for
didn't you
music.
say in your notes that you thought the Meier material had to become popular in the 70s or something, didn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, of course. With the advent of the way technology was going and so on. So, and actually, it's interesting that you mentioned the in,
Calculations or whatever you call them.
well, that too. But I mean, earlier in the show, you were talking about with Michel Delafave,
Oh,
the
yeah, yeah, yeah.
interview,
Yeah, yeah.
and but after that interview, I guess they were asking Christian some questions as well as he was driving them down to the train station, and he talked about actually how the internet was given to our scientists by the Pleiaren, and so if it hadn't been for that, the information in the contacts would have been snuffed out, and that's exactly what I had calculated before I found the case, and yeah, so that's how I pinpointed it to 1975 in Switzerland.
Wow.
So it's interesting that they talked about that. So I guess it's being translated now into German. So I'm happy to say that it's 45 or 48 pages long now. So
Oh, your
it's
writing is?
yeah. So
My
and
goodness.
so
How long
that's
is it in English?
no, well, 48, 45 or 48 pages. So depending on how you're looking at it on the computer, but
Now, do you consider it complete?
it's getting pretty close. I think I might just add a few pictures and things to, for examples of, what George Lucas was talking about versus with digital versus film photography and stuff like that.
Hmm.
And I might add some other examples of what Chris Locke and Raul Zal wrote in their books, in their recent book. I mean. With their analysis and so on. Being able to demonstrate your own research and to do your own research, you don't have to rely on experts anymore. And so,
No,
uh,
you don't, do you?
no. So if you learn the scientific method in terms of actually measuring, not just memorizing facts, but actually measuring, doing actual measurements, then you're on your own. You don't need to depend on experts anymore. So then, for a case like this that's so controversial and so important at the same time, it's probably the most important skill you can learn. So if we're going to survive as a species, as a planet. So
When I was originally planning for the show tonight, I was going to play all these clips, since we've already talked an hour, I'm going to wait for another day for those.
all right.
But some of the things I, for example, wanted to talk about, food for future programs, would be this whole thing about the F-35. And that may sound strange and inappropriate and out of context from our current discussion, but to me it's not, because it's a perfect example of how our thinking has gotten so incorrect and so illogical. And Pierre Sprey is the great designer of airplanes. He's the guy that worked with a couple other designers to develop the F-16 and the A-10. These are fantastic planes that are just amazing. But the F-35 is a turkey. It's a terrible plane. It's a horrible plane. And it costs it's like they've spent 1.5 trillion on this thing.
Mm-hmm.
So you can just watch, and all the clips I have are about the decline of our society. And the next one was about Alex Jones versus Dr. Steve Pachinik. Dr. Steve Pachinik is a guest of Alex Jones, and they have these shows all the time. But Steve Pachinik is just saying it's so stupid what Trump has done with this whole thing with Afghanistan, because he just come out and said that we're going to stay in Afghanistan and we're going to commit more men to it and blah, 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 blah.
Mm-hmm.
Horrific. And then I got an example, and I don't even remember this doctor's name, but this doctor who cured all these cancer patients, mostly with diet changes.
Mm-hmm.
And he ended up in jail for like a year and a half for doing that.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's just, and then I go on and I have other crazy news stuff like sports news and some of the crazy stuff. You know, have you heard about the Conor McGregor Floyd Mayweather fight yet?
I'm really not into fights at all, so.
I don't blame you. But I think Floyd is going to get about $100 million for this fight.
Oh, jeez.
And Connor is probably going to make $30 or $40 million. But what I'm saying is, can you imagine all this money, like $1.5 trillion into this terrible airplane?
Mm-hmm.
And then $100 million into this one-day event fight.
Well, I was just watching some link last week or a few days ago about all of the Olympic sites that have basically just been turned to dust. They're just completely ignored, and you know, they've spent hundreds and hundreds of billions of dollars on these things over the years. And you just go through country after country after country, like Brazil, China, and on and on and on over the years. And it's disgusting.
And they're never used again, probably.
They're never used again. Yeah.
God.
Never, ever again.
Now, are we an insane society?
Is that a question? Yeah.
Are we an insane society or what? It's so bizarre what is happening. Oh.
Yeah. And that's just the Olympics. I mean, you know, there's basketball, there's baseball, there's hockey, there's, you know,
it goes on
football and soccer, which is the other football. And
yeah,
I mean, for crying out loud. And that's trillions of dollars. That's trillions of dollars a year on that garbage. And for what?
I got to get out my statistics on overpopulation just a second, and if I can find it, keep chatting. I'll have to.
I guess it's at 8.8 billion now or something, isn't it?
I think so, but I wanted to get my notes on how many people starve to death all the time. Because
geez.
We were talking about all the money that's wasted. 10 million children die every year from starvation or starvation-related diseases, and we spend $100 million on a fight.
Yeah.
That lasts one day, or an hour, or 15 minutes, or however long it takes, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And 10 million children die every year from starvation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And the world population grows by 77 million people annually.
That's the lowest estimate.
Is it?
Oh yeah. No, that's the lowest estimate. It's like in some of the years in the last, you know, decade or two, it's been like over 200 million a year.
Really?
So, yeah. No, that's like the lowest estimate. So
wow,
it's insane. Yeah. So that's how many New York cities. I mean, that's, you know, New York City's 8.5 million people.
Oh, I thought it was more than that. It's probably
maybe it's more. Well, even if it is twice that much, I mean, it's still like, how many New York cities is that?
A lot.
That's a lot. Yeah. So try and feed all those people, and, you know, educate them and clean up their garbage. And
clean up their garbage is right.
It's unreal.
And 9,000 newborns per hour.
Jeez, eh?
Try to put your mind around that.
Yeah, I was just reading about Africa today, and they're going to be doubling in the next, you know, 30 or 40 years.
Oh my!
So, and they're they're on their can already. So I mean, it's just, you know, they're starved, and there's no education, there's no infrastructure, there's nothing there, and so yeah, that's
And the
great.
worst thing is just to give them food.
Yeah, just that alone, much less all the rest of it, healthcare and a job and that pays, and a house and education and cleaning up their shit and just giving them clean water and it's just power, electricity, everything. I mean, holy crap. What a dumb society. I mean, I don't know. I don't understand. Like, I think when I was thinking about it today, anybody can predict the future. It's just most people just turn off that ability because I don't know why, but they just do it, and it's just the simplest, easiest thing to do to predict, and so like I was able to make the calculations when I was a teenager to
That,
find the Maya
that's
case.
amazing. But you have to be able to think logically to do that.
Well, you just have to think. So just think, it is literally as simple as 2 + 2 = 4. But if you don't think about that, then if you don't think about those things, those very simple, logical, basic things that are so, hard to refute, the more you put them together, the less contradictions there are. Well, yeah, great. So if you don't actually take the time to do that, then yeah, if you're trying to impress everyone, well, that's just the whole thing. It's an ego thing. It's a miseducation thing. It's so many things put together. I don't know. Just talking to my family recently and all those bickerings I've had recently. I mean, it just makes me realize why the world looks like the way it is. So, and I mean, this is like a relatively tame situation compared to a lot of parts in the world. So,
Oh, sure.
this is really nothing compared to what it could be in my situation. I mean, so,
Oh, yeah, 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 yeah.
but it's still insane. So
Well, the world, I really think we have the potential to really turn things around. I'm an optimist,
mhm.
even though things certainly have a lot of unbelievable big challenges. I
Mhm.
really think uh, the logic of this information is inescapable.
Yeah, and just look at what the Plejaren made possible with the internet.
Exactly. I would,
WikiLeaks.
yeah.
I mean, you got these journalists. I forget his name. Is a really good journalist though, and he was saying that WikiLeaks has done more in the last 2 years than he's done in his whole lifetime in terms of revealing things to the public.
Wow. That's
So
huge.
it is huge, and it's so useful. And I can see why Billy does support WikiLeaks, and I don't understand people who are just like, oh yeah, well he has charges laid against him. Well, fuck, anybody can lay charges against anybody these days. Doesn't mean a damn thing. Like it's just a way to divert people's attention. But if you're dumb enough to fall for that and not actually look at the information that he's publishing, well, that's that's the world we live in. That's the world of assuming, making assumptions, being gullible, and believing and not using your brain.
Well, Daniel, I want to thank you for a really great hour of conversation. It's always such a pleasure.
Yeah, it's long overdue,
All
man.
right, buddy. I'm going
All
to
right.
save this and then post it so other people can listen.
Sounds good. All right.
See you. Have a good
Well,
night.
yeah, you too.
Bye bye.
Bye.